Hello, my friends. Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. It's Friday. I know for some of you, they're out there working hard. That's a big day. It used to be for me, I can tell you that for sure. Well, they're starting to pop up here already. Songs Home Style. Looks like he's the first one on here, or she, he or she. Anyway, welcome. And I think I got a good program for you today. It's going to be a little bit different because I'm going to talk about some Native American artifacts found here on the farm and tie at least one of them into music. And I think you'll like the story and be interested in that. And I think you'll like to see what we found here anyway, because it's pretty interesting, and it is definitely historic, and it's definitely worth preserving. So I think you'll enjoy that. But we're going to get into our regular program first, and then we'll get into that stuff. I'll also give you a project update today, and I may also do a very short instrumental performance on one of those projects. And we'll start off with Ron's status. Ron, my buddy, you know, I told you he got COVID back there at the same time I did, really. He actually came down with it, I don't know, 2 or 3 days after I did, something like that. And he is now recovered, and I say recovered, I mean, it's, you know how that is, it's a process, but he is back on his pegs now, and he's using a chainsaw, and he's not on oxygen anymore, so he's getting back to his normal routine. We're playing every Tuesday night, as I've mentioned each time, at the Dickey's Barbecue in Rolla, Missouri. So every Tuesday evening around 6:30 p.m. or somewhere in that neighborhood, we start playing there. And it's mostly our band, and it's mostly just a practice and just kind of a loose performance. It's kind of a practice performance thing. And the word's starting to get out on that, so there's starting to be more and more people there. Mountain View, Arkansas is coming up June 9th through the 12th. We'll be down there, just friends jamming. That'll be my band members and just other friends and from the area here that'll be down there, and we'll be jamming. So if you decide you want to go down to Mountain View, Arkansas, June 9th through the 12th, as it gets closer, let me know via email, and I'll send you my text number where you can get a hold of me when we're down there, because there's no telling where we'll be. I used to say we're always under those gazebos or on a front porch there, but not anymore. With these guys camping now, it's changed everything. So I'll have to tell you where we'll be when we get down there. In terms of subscribers and all that, we're still we're at 76,222 this morning when I checked, and that still seems to be climbing fairly steadily. At that rate, though, I doubt I'll hit 100,000 this year. I would really want to hit the 100,000. I don't know why. I just think that's a magic number, and I want to hit it. We're presently still holding steady at 10.3 million minutes of view time each month. That's a lot. That really is a lot. It's a lot more than you might even think. If you put that out on paper, it's really impressive. And it's 367.3 thousand. So in other words, 367,000 minutes of view time each day. I've been contacted by lots of advertisers, and people that want to support me via me advertising their product, etc. Skillshare is one of them, and there's been several others too. Squarespace, I think. Anyway, I have so far held out on that. I've been declining that. It's some decent money, but on the other hand, I've never wanted to be a millionaire. So, it really doesn't, the money doesn't entice me very much. That's the thing about money. It just doesn't do much for me. It does for a lot of people. It's me. And don't get me wrong. There's been lots of times in my life where every nickel counted like twice, And as a matter of fact, most of my life has been that way. Anyway, the point is that money is not my motivator, though. As long as I've got enough money to pay my bills, I'm a happy guy. And presently, I can still pay my bills even though sometimes it's just barely. I'll mention again that my son has a new channel. It's Homestead Horsemanship. I would appreciate it if you'd check him out. You can just type in Homestead Horsemanship in YouTube and you'll find him. He just did a neat, cute little video just the other day about how he calls his stallion in. He just walks out to the pasture. There's a whole bunch of horses out there, and he just says, "Come here, Bob." And Bob, the only horse out there that it makes any difference, he raises his head and he comes all the way up to the barn, you know. All the rest of the horses stay out there and eat. It's pretty cool. And he's a stallion, so you would think that would be hard to do, but he's pretty smart. And then there's links in the description, and I still left that one out there about him snow skiing behind a horse. Actually, it wasn't him, it was his brother-in-law snow skiing behind a horse. And then I do still have a link in the description about Alan Dust and his sanders. People think I'm making it up when I say Alan Dust and his sander. You think I'm making up his name, but that's his real name. What else would he invent? It'd have to be a sander, wouldn't it? And so anyway, there's a link in there about that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's those rotary sanders. As a matter of fact, here's one right here. It's these rotary sanders that fit on your drill. You put your drill on right here, and then you can contour your necks and any other part that needs contouring. It's pretty handy. They work really well. Way better than I ever thought they would. They really do work well. John Manure's AccuSlice link is in the description also. And that really is all the housekeeping items. Looks like we got a lot of people on here, 127 so far. Last week, as you know, it abruptly ended when I touched that microphone sitting right there. So I'm not going to touch the microphone if I can help it this time. I have no idea why that caused a problem. You would think just touching a microphone lightly wouldn't do anything, but apparently it did. So hopefully we won't have that happen. I was impressed when I watched the last one in that the quality of the picture was considerably better. There is still always a lag, I think, on the mouth and the words in the mouth. That's probably never going to go away, at least until maybe we get Starlink or something. And Starlink is still leaving me, out in the cold. And I looked on their new map that they have, and our area is pretty much dark. Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you look at the whole United States, the whole western United States is all lit up. But the eastern part, and especially right down in our area, it's just as dark as it can be. Right in our area especially. Yeah, you would know that. That only makes sense for me. That's that Rosa, luck. Like I said, it should have been named Rosa's luck, not... who is that other guy? I can't even think of his name now. You know me and names. I can't think of them. Well, all right, enough chit-chat. Let's talk about, let's go ahead and we'll talk about the arrowheads first, and then I'll give you the status of the projects here. The artifacts and things, I wanted to, let me just show you this first on the screen. I thought you might find this interesting. Okay, the arrowhead in the lower left, I'm going to try to look at it because it's backwards for me. It's completely backwards. So anyway, down here on the lower left for me, that white arrowhead that you see there, that is called a Dalton point. It's very old. It's 10 to 12,000 years old, and that's just an estimate. It could be a little newer, it could be a little older. They really aren't 100% sure on that, but it is what they call a Dalton point. And you notice how the end of that doesn't have the shank on it where you would tie it to your arrowhead. What they did in those cases, or the spear, they split the spear and the point went in between the split, and then they tied it around that way. That's how they put those on. Those are made different. Now that's the reason I want to point that out on this one. That really was, now I didn't find that one here at this farm, by the way. I just want to point that out too. I found that at my old house where I used to live. I was sitting out in the backyard. I was learning the G minor chord on my mandolin. In fact, I was learning all the minor chords that day on my mandolin, and I was especially playing around in the G minor key. And I mentioned, I think last week or the week before, someone asked about me playing the tune Last Warrior, which is the kickoff of my videos. Well, that's when I wrote it. I found that arrowhead right there. And honestly, that was the very first full arrowhead I ever found in my life. I found pieces, bits and pieces, a lot of times. But that one was the very first one I ever found. And it really is the most significant one I've ever found. And it's so old. It turned out there was a little spring in our backyard there. We kind of uncovered it. It was kind of a wet weather spring, but once we uncovered it, it seemed to flow pretty much all year round, and we ended up making a goldfish pond out of it. And that arrowhead was found real close to that spring, which makes sense when you think about it, that the Native Americans would have been going for water all the time, and 12,000 years ago, or 10,000, or however long ago it was, that spring probably was quite a bit bigger. And anyway, that's how I connect it. I'm just assuming that's the reason it was near that spring, but you don't know that for sure. That's just a guess on my part. It could have been lost many years later, or it may not have anything to do with the spring at all. But that's just a conjunction on my part. Anyway, the upper left here, that hole in the ground that you can see all the rocks in, that looks deep, but it's not deep. It's barely as deep as the rocks. The rocks are about 4 inches thick or 3 inches thick, and the hole's probably 6 inches deep. And that rock that's laying outside the hole, I was plowing, looking for food plots. And now, by this time, when I plowed that rock up, I had found hundreds and hundreds of artifacts in this food plot area here. And this was several years into my food plot hunting, because I was still hunting for places on the farm that I could actually plow, because everything around here is rock. Well, I had found hundreds of artifacts. Then I plowed up that flat rock, the one that's laying up on top there. And as soon as I plowed it, I jumped off the tractor, and my daughter just happened to be passing through on the four-wheeler at that moment, and I stopped her and I said, "Rochelle, you're not going to believe this, but there's a Native American buried under that rock." And she went, "Yeah, right, Dad, sure." And she just kind of like you're an idiot, that kind of a reaction, I said, "I'm not kidding you." I said, "That rock came out of the creek down the hill. It didn't walk up here by itself. And that's the first big flat rock I've found up here." I said, "They brought it up here for a reason," because I had already found hundreds of pieces by this time. So I knew it was a very active area. So sure enough, she said, "Well, if it is, let's dig it up." I said, "Well, I won't dig a grave, but I said we could uncover, see if there's any more rocks there, And so sure enough, we uncovered it, and there they are, And I registered it with the state of Missouri. And because, I was a member of the St. Louis Archaeological Society for many years. So I knew what to do and what the processes were. And so I got a hold of the right people, and I registered it with the state. Well, they wrote back to me, and they asked me if I was a professional archaeologist, because they said, "This was the most complete report we've ever got." That's what they said. I'm not making that up. That's the truth. And she said, you must be a professional. I said, "No, I just, I've been in your society for a long time, and I understand what's going on here. And so I just, wanted to make sure it was a complete report." Well, she said, "Well, if I were you, sir, I would cover it back up, because someone will sneak in and dig it up." And I'm thinking, out here in the middle of nowhere, there's not a chance, Well, I kind of didn't think about, this was, got to keep in mind, this was back a while, and GPS had really just come on the scene in the 90s, and this was like 2001-ish time frame. And anyway, I just didn't think about the GPS thing. Well, I gave her coordinates to it, and to where it was. Well, sure enough, I was showing this grave to my neighbor, who is a Native American enthusiast anyway, and he does metal art and stuff, and does scenes of Old West and Native Americans and horses and things. He does all kinds of metal art that way. Well, he was just so, excited to see it, and so I showed it to him. Well, it was about to rain. It was on a Sunday afternoon, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was just going to pour down rain. And so we said, we better get out of here, and it rained solid from that time on. Like within an hour or so, it started raining. And it rained solid all the way up to Wednesday. I was in my shop, in my actual music instrument shop, working on instruments, and my wife came in the shop and she said, "Did you dig that grave?" And I said, "Well, no, I wouldn't dig that grave." She goes, "Well, somebody dug it up." Oh, I was devastated. I'm seriously telling you, I was so upset I couldn't even talk. And I'm not exaggerating. I literally couldn't talk for 3 days. I mean, I was so mad. I am just thankful I did not catch the people that did it. But sure enough, those people were waiting for my neighbor and I to leave, and you could tell that they literally snuck in and dug it just minutes after we left, because there was not a footprint around, and it was solid mud everywhere, just solid mud. And it had rained for 3 days. So we would have seen their footprints or something. There wasn't a footprint around anywhere, but yet it was all dug out and thrown out. So they had to dig it just before the rain started. Oh, you talking about mad. I'm so thankful I didn't catch them. Because if I had caught them, you would not be seeing my picture right now. I would be in jail, I guarantee you. Yeah, the Italian temper in me on that one went through the roof big time. These other two pictures on the screen here, I'll just tell you quickly about them and move on. The one in the upper right is what we call a Calf Creek point. It's right about 5,000 years old, almost exactly, and I have a neat story about this one too. I was, again, back there trying to grade the area for planting some food plots for the animals, and it was in the summertime or late summer, and it was dusty, dry. I mean, like, it was just powdery dust. And in that powder, and literally I saw nothing except a triangle shape in the powder. I could not see any rock or anything. And I was on the tractor, and I'm always watching for these things, you understand. So I'm looking off to my right there, and I see this triangle, and it's like a whole lane over from me, and tractor lane over. So I stopped. I thought, triangle dust shape in the dust? I mean, that's just unusual. You don't see an angular shape like that. So I just stopped the tractor. I got off, and I went over there, and I just literally swept the dust off, and that point was laying there. Well, the significance of that point being it's about 5,000 years old. My site has been dated anywhere from 8,000 to about 1,500 years ago. I mean, it's an old site. And so when I found that point, I was really excited about finding that, because that's the only one of that shape I found. And it's a full triangle, as you see. The point, those ears out on the corners there, they come all the way down to where the shaft is. See, that's referred to, that shape is referred to as a Calf Creek type point. Now, some people will argue and say it's something else, but that's basically what it is. So I went back to the house. It was lunchtime, and I took a shower real quick, and I sat down with my lunch, and I turned on PBS of all things, and would you not know, and I promise you this is the truth, they had a documentary on there about these Calf Creek points, and it was about a guy finding these extinct buffalo in this riverbed. He was digging these buffalo skulls out of this riverbed, and this one buffalo skull had a Calf Creek point embedded in the base of the skull, right below where the horn would come out. Well, they first took the thing to a buffalo expert, because this documentary is trying to prove, is this real or is this a hoax, And so they took it to a buffalo expert, and the guy says, "Oh wow," he says, "that's an extinct buffalo." He said that those went extinct about 5,000 years ago, and because their horns didn't look the same, they kind of went out more straight. And anyway, he said, he says, you can tell, and he compared the different horns and things, and showed those folks, how the difference was. And he says, I can't tell you about the arrowhead, but I can tell you for sure that's an extinct buffalo. It's been extinct for 5,000 years. So then they took it to an arrowhead specialist, and they went to what do you call it, an X-ray machine. And they X-rayed the skull to see the full point. And the guy says, I can tell you for sure that's an authentic point, and he says that point's at least 5,000 years old. So, and I had just found that point like minutes before that. It was so cool that, you know, you have something like that happen. Then the bottom right thing there that you see, you may not even be able to tell what that is. That is a hand axe. And I'll switch back to the main camera here. And a hand axe is literally that. It's an axe that they used in their hand. You'd think, well, this groove is where they tied it onto a limb, but you would be wrong in this case. Now, they did do that, but that was later on. When they made this full groove all the way around, these were what they held in their hands. See how that groove works all the way around on your fingers and how you hold it there? And these were very, very heavy. This is way heavier than you think. This is really heavy. Heavier than any average rock you'll find. And, you know, and so this gave a weight to their hand when they were chopping. This was before they figured out to put them on sticks. Once they figured out how to put them on sticks, and once they did that, then they quit making the groove all the way around. They only made the groove basically on the two sides and maybe even the bottom a little bit, but they would only groove the two sides, and then they would tie them on. And they were thinner and lighter than this, not quite this heavy. This, in case you're wondering what this is hematite. Hematite is iron ore. Now, these were primitive people, and this, by the way, this dates to about 8,000 years ago, according to the archaeology information that I have. Dates to about 8,000 years ago. Now, you know, people think these people were, you know, stupid or, you know, they were Stone Age people, no doubt about that. But they were very intelligent people because, first of all, how many times have you found a piece of hematite? You know, I mean, like, it's not something you just walk out in your backyard and you find, you know. They were not stupid people. And this is iron ore. This was the iron of their day. This is the hardest thing they could find around here anyway. Now, I'm sure there's harder in different places of the world, but this was the hardest thing they could find around here. These come from down by St. James, Missouri, at the what they call the old iron works now. And anyway, so this hematite came from down in that area, and they brought it up here, which is only, as the crow flies, maybe 30 miles, if that. I doubt it's 30 miles, probably more like 25. So anyway, but I want to tell you a real quick story about this. My wife doesn't like any of this artifact stuff, and I'm sure some of you probably don't either, and don't even want to hear about it. I'm sorry if I'm boring you. But my wife, she's not interested in that at all, could care less. And so we're back there and we're looking for wild grapes. And it had just rained. And I said to her, I said, let's look for artifacts. There ought to be plenty of them laying on top of the ground now with the rain, you know, and because it washes the dirt off, you see them real easy. I don't want to, I never find nothing. I said, well, give it a shot, you know, just, you know, take a look. And so she's standing by the four-wheeler. We only had one four-wheeler with us that day. And she was riding on the back. So I get off and I'm looking out there and I'm walking around and I'm looking for him. And finally she gets off the four-wheeler and she's just kind of standing there like this type of thing. Like, hurry up, will you, you know? And I said, so I'm saying to her these exact words. And I promise to you that this is not made up. This is not I'm not dramatizing this for the video. I say to her, I said, you know, with the hundreds and hundreds of artifacts I found here, I cannot believe I have not found an axe head. And I swear to you, as God is my witness, this is exactly what she does. She just bends down like this. She's looking at me because she's mad. And she's going, here's one right here. Let's just go. Come on, here's one right here. Let's just go. And then she does this and she goes, her eyes get this big around. And this is what she had in her hand. I'm not kidding. It's just nuts. You know, you got to remember or understand that I have spent hundreds of hours looking out there in that same area where she And she just bends down, doesn't even look at the ground, literally grabs the first thing she feels and holds it up like this. And this was, so, you know, you just won the lottery like 10 times right there. I mean, just how often is that going to happen? It gets better, believe it or not. A month later, we're back there again, and I don't remember why we were back there this time. They said, hey, it rained again, let's take another look. I don't want to, I never find anything. I said, you just found an 8,000-year-old artifact. You found the coolest thing I've ever seen. You know, you should just take a look. She gets off the four-wheeler, and I swear to you, it was just like she was walking across the golf course. She's just walking like this. She's not looking at the ground. She walks 30 yards, bends over, picks this up, and says, here's another one. I still have not found one of these. I swear to you, it's exactly how it happened. She spent less than 30 seconds to find both of these. Well, about a minute total. It's just nuts. It's just completely nuts. And they're both roughly about 8,000 years old. Now, here's what I found before we found those. I only found this. Now, this is a piece of hematite also. But if you look at it up close, it's, you know, see how it's slick and it's rounded and it's dark and it's heavy? Because it's iron ore, it's very heavy. Well, I thought it was probably, I didn't know about hematite at this point in time when I found this. And I thought it was probably a meteor. I thought, man, I found a meteorite, you know? And so I took it up to the university here in Rolla, and I went to the geology department, you know, the head guy there, and that they told me to go see. And he as soon as he picked it up, he goes, oh, that's hematite. I said, hematite? He goes, yeah, that's iron ore. And he said, there's no doubt, that's what it is. And so he took a coffee mug, you know how you take a porcelain coffee mug, a porcelain one, and you rub it like this. Well, it'll be bright red on the bottom, and that's how you can tell it's hematite. Well, you know, this was the only thing I found in that same area. So I thought, well, what did they do with that? You know, it's obviously it's not in, you know, this was before we found the tomahawks. So I had no idea that they made tomahawks or the hatchet heads or whatever you want to call them, axe heads. Hand axes is the real proper term. I had no idea that's what they made, you know, used the hematite for. But I got to thinking, what was this piece for? Well, when you start rotating this around, you don't even have to look at it. You can rotate this around in your hand and it instantly finds this spot right here. And you think, you know, and you think impossible that, but it does. It fits your hand absolutely perfect. There's even an indentation right here for your thumb. I mean, it fits it perfectly. And yet it leaves this big heavy corner exposed. So what I think they used it for was either possibly chipping arrowheads, possibly breaking nuts like walnuts and things. And by the way, this just happens to be in one of the most heavily walnut populated areas on the farm. And so I say this was just a tool. They used it like a hammer. So that's what, and it's much, much heavier than a rock. I mean, I wish you could feel how heavy this is. It's really heavy. It's not as heavy as lead, but it's very heavy. So, okay, I just have just a couple more things real quick to show you, and I'll get off of this subject. Sorry if I'm boring you to tears. I haven't looked at the comments, so you're probably hating me right now. I'm sorry. But here's something that you would see, and you think, well, that's just a rock. You know, and it kind of looks like it is just a rock. But if you know anything about artifacts, what this is what they call it an adze. But again, it's a tool. And if you look at the tool, if you look at it this way, you can see that they made a sharp edge on it. See the sharp edge there? And you can see how they worked it. And if you turn it over, it's also a sharp edge, and they worked it, and it's straight. And again, I found it in the place where all these other artifacts are, so I know it's a piece that they worked on. And this is what they call an adze. And we found several of these, actually. We didn't just find one. We found quite a few shaped exactly like this. So that's how we know that that was a work piece. Then here's another thing, and this is sort of like the adze, but it's slightly different. This was just a rock. that they used to break off flakes that were just incredibly sharp. And they just knock these big flakes off, and they use them for like a knife or a scalpel. And seriously, they're as sharp as a scalpel. They really are. In fact, there's been lots of studies that say that these edges are like only 5 microns thick. And when you break off these pieces, let me show you an exact. I'm not saying this piece came off this rock, but it's very similar to a piece that would have come off this rock. So in other words, they knocked these flakes off, and then this was their knife of the day. And you know, people think they use these arrowheads as knives, and I'm sure they did to some degree, but this is their true knife. Because it's so razor sharp, and you could skin a rabbit with this with no problem at all. It worked just as well as your modern knife. You just grab a hold of that rabbit and cut it right open. And I've got just bags full of those shards like that we found in that same area. Okay, and then the last thing I want to show you is just this, and I'll just tell you that this big one here, that one there, and this one here were not found on the farm. That one, and this one. And then these two here, right here under my finger, were not found on the farm. All the rest of them were. You can see here's that Calf Creek point again. Here's some more of those adzes. These are the smaller ones. This tool down here, this is really a cool tool. I'll try to get it up close where you can see it. And you think, what in the heck is that? Well, there's a round hole, a round smooth hole in the center of that rock. Can you think of what they used it for? Now it's also worked around the edges, so it could have been like in their day that was a multi-tool. So they used it for 2 purposes. Their edges had been all worked so that you could use it as a scraper, but that round smooth hole, what do you think they used that for? Starting a fire. You see that stick that you put in your palm of your hand like this? You can't put it in the palm of your hand and spin that with that bow. They would take and spin that stick. Well, you have to have something to hold that stick, and that round smooth area in that rock is what they held that stick with. Otherwise, it'd burn a hole through your hand in a heartbeat. So it's very cool what we found there. Very, very, very cool. It does get me excited. Thank you very much, Frazzle Guitars. I appreciate it very much. He says, good morning from Frazzle Guitars, Music and Luthier's store. You're our hero. Well, thank you. You're my hero. I appreciate it. Anyway, I'm going to get off this now. I'm sure I wore that subject out and probably told you way more than you wanted to know, and you're probably bored to tears. But it's pretty cool to find a site that's that intact. That whole area is that intact. And it's an elevated area, and there's water on 3 sides, and there's these big, huge hills on 3 sides, so it's blocked from the wind. I mean, it's like it was a paradise for these people back in those days. So that's why there's so much, stuff there. That's why there is so many artifacts. Okay, let's go to the status of these projects. This one didn't change much from yesterday. In fact, it didn't change at all from yesterday. So I'm going to have to put this on hold for a little while because I just can't get to it right now. Got too many other things going on. But I just want to say one more time, thank you so much for your kind feedback on the coloring, because I truly, really thought I screwed up. I know you probably think, oh, he's just doing this for drama and to make a video, but it's not the truth. The truth is, I worked my tail off to build this thing up to this point, and I'm trying to make it a really fine instrument. And then my wife comes in and says, it's red. And I go, red? I really thought I screwed up big time. And I really thought you guys were all going to go like, man, I can't believe the color of that thing. Just, I was afraid that was going to be the reaction. So I really do appreciate your feedback. You made me feel a lot better about that because I was very upset. Anyway, this turned out to be a lot simpler project than I was expecting. I told you yesterday that I leveled this fretboard in this Sandbush mandolin. This was that one that's got the crazy neck, man. I mean, this thing was crazy. Well, it's really flat now, so I'm happy with that. The neck angle on this, if I'm being critical, that's the only thing that's not great. It would be nice if this neck angle, and I'm exaggerating, was a little more like this. It needs to be a little steeper, but just a little bit steeper, not a lot. But otherwise, it's in really good shape. And what turned out to happen is I did not have to make a new nut. And therefore, I'm not charging the customer anything. I really expected to have to make a new nut and do a new setup because we put these bigger frets on it. You can see the big frets there. But it turned out I didn't have to. And the reason I didn't have to was because I sanded the curl out of this neck. This was the ski ramp back here, and it was a little bit ramped up here in the front. And by the time I knocked this ramp off of the front, then that lowered the action enough, where I didn't have to do anything. And it worked out perfect. In fact, I actually had to lower the strings. I had to cut the grooves a little deeper, which totally blew me away. I never expected to have to do that. So, but it turned out really good. And because the guy had to send it back to me, I wanted to do something a little bit extra special for him. So I contacted him and I said, I want to make you a custom truss rod cover. You can see it has no truss rod cover on it. I said, I'd like to make you a custom truss rod cover on it. What would you like it to say? And he says, well, the name of that mandolin is Beetlejuice. So there you go. So I made him a truss rod cover that I'll put on later. I just thought I wanted to show it to you like this. And I thought, if you don't care, I'll play you a little tune on it. It's a nice sounding mandolin, it really is. I got my usual excuses in terms of playing, so don't expect too much, but I'll do what I can. And the only other thing is, I just get your questions ready if you have any, because we'll take those after I make this little performance here. And I'm going to turn the camera down a little bit if I can. Hopefully I don't blow up something here turning the camera down. I thought I'd try a little bit of Nashville blues. This is in D minor. I like to play in minors. I shouldn't do it this early in the morning until my hands warm up. Oh, well, just like poor Emery the other day, she messed up her ending, and so did I. Well, that's what you get when you do them live like this, and when your hands are freezing, and it's cold in this shop this morning, and I got 19 other excuses if you want to hear them. But anyway, it turned out really nice. I hope he's going to be really happy with it, and I'm just sorry he had to send it back. But, on the positive, he got bigger frets, which is what he wanted, I guess, and then he also, got a custom truss rod cover. So that would be worth the price of shipping, I think. All right, does anyone have any questions for me? It looks like we have a few here, so let me scroll back up and see if I can find where they started. Yeah, it looks like there's some way up high, so let me get up to those first. Paul Akers, can you speak on the top of a saddle, how round or sharp it should be, leading edge? And now, are we talking about a mandolin or a guitar? Either one of them should be roughly the same, and I say roughly. You ask a dozen people, you'll probably get a dozen answers on some of this, but my take is that the inside edges of your saddle and your nut are the last place your string should make contact. So, you don't want a super steep angle on a saddle. especially on a violin or on a mandolin especially, or a banjo perhaps, you don't want a super steep angle. And the reason is that that angle, the string causes that angle, it pushes the saddle forward more. So what you want is you want a slightly angled top on your or groove or whatever on top of your saddle. If it's a guitar, you don't have grooves necessarily. And on a guitar, you can get away with a little bit steeper angle, but you still don't need a very steep angle. All you really need is just a very slight angle, just enough to get the string to touch at the end of the saddle. Right, like this would be going towards the peg head and the nut and everything. So when it's coming over that saddle, you just want just enough angle so that the last place that string touches is right here. So in other words, there's no black and white degree or angle thing, anything like that. It's just a kind of a feel thing, and you just don't want it to be, you don't want it to be super steep, because if you do, the string will pull the thing forward instead of going over it like that. And if it was super steep and really sharp, you'd cut your string anyway. So you just want just enough angle to make sure that that last point of contact is right there. Because if you have it flat, then it'll buzz right here. In other words, like say maybe that's just a thousandth of an inch higher in the middle of your saddle than this is, your string will buzz right here. And people come to me all the time, I'm hearing this buzz and I can't figure it out. Very often it's in your saddle. Even if it's a guitar, believe it or not, it can actually buzz on the front edge of that saddle if the saddle isn't cut just right. And it just needs to be just enough angle to matter. That's the best I can tell you about it. It doesn't need to be sharp. You can, like if you're, like on a piece of antler, it can actually get very sharp right on that front edge. And what I'll do there is I'll just take a small file, and I'm obviously this is way thicker than a saddle, but pretend this is the saddle, and it's better for demonstration because it's bigger. And I'll just take a file and just do that, just maybe once or twice, just right on the very corner of the front of the saddle, just to knock off the knife edge. And I mean, I don't bevel it, I'm not beveling it. I'm just knocking off that knife edge. So you would want to do that perhaps, but other than that, you don't need any other angles or anything. I hope that answers your question. And but all saddles should be kind of handled the same way, that way in terms of the angle. It shouldn't be real steep. It should just be just enough to do the job. Okay. The next question. Well, I thought I saw another one or two in that area, but now I don't, so I'm scrolling down. I hope I didn't pass somebody up. If I did, you'll have to ask it again. I'm sorry. But I'm down here to Peter Bryan now, and Peter says, don't apologize. This has been an absolute delight to listen to. Most of your viewers are interested in more than just instruments. Thank you, Peter. Thank you. I really get off on that Native American stuff. You may think this is hokey or something, but I guess I'm a sentimentalist. I can't help that. But like when you build an instrument, and you hand make that instrument, and you think about people 300 years from now, just like Stradivari, are going to be holding that instrument and appreciating it. Well, this guy built this 8,000 years ago. And he made this, and I've still got it in my hand today. I think that is so cool, And the same way with all those other artifacts. I mean, they're, hundreds, if, in most cases, most of the stuff we find here is at least 1,500 years old. Now, we have found a few arrow tips that are only 1,200 years old, or maybe 800 years old, that type of thing. And that's these points here at the top. I didn't show you this, and by the way, I'm glad I'm showing you this because there's one more thing you ought to see and hear here. Take a look at. I don't know if you can see it very clearly. I think it's this one. I think it's this little one right here that's broken. But if you can see the edges. Can you see those little tiny edges? They're serrated, just exactly like like those serrations I told you I don't like in a knife blade. It's exactly like that and that little tiny arrowhead, and he serrated, and it was so precise. And you think these were primitive Stone Age people, but think about the precision of that, and think about that man, how he took pride in that. You can tell that wasn't just something they beat together. He took pride in that. He didn't have to go to all that kind of detail and put those little tiny serrations on that little tiny. By the way, those little ones, that's technically an arrowhead. All of those bigger ones are spear points. People call them arrowheads, but they're mostly all spear points. Arrowheads, if you put that on an arrow, those big ones, or any of those middle-sized big ones, and you put that on an arrow, your arrow's just going to go like this in the ground. Because there's too much weight, and you're trying to push that weight really fast with a thin stick. That thin stick will bend because of that extra weight out on the front, and it'll just push the arrow right almost straight down in the ground. Won't go hardly any distance at all. Ask me how I know. And so that's why they made those little tiny ones. Now people call those bird points. The uninformed, quote unquote, archaeologists out there will call those bird points. And it's just, you can use that term in terms as long as you know what you're talking about. A bird point is really an arrowhead. That's what an arrowhead really is. But they call them bird points because they think they would shoot birds with them. But you could shoot a deer with that. You could shoot a rabbit with that. It really wouldn't matter, your game. If you stuck it in there, it's going to do some damage, So anyway, I think that I just wanted to point that out. I'm glad you said that and made me think of that. But thank you for the comment. I appreciate it. Let's look at the next question. The side edge of my fretboard, just below a fret, I have a chip out of the board. Would CA glue mixed with wood dust be the thing to fill this with, or something else? Well, that's Neil C. Yeah, I guess I'd have to see it to know what I'd do for sure. But yeah, CA glue's an option, a decent option actually. And what you might want to do, and you might want to actually get your dust in the hole first, and then get you a little tiny drop, and you might even use a toothpick. And put the CA glue in something else like a cap or something, a lid, and then just take a drop on a toothpick and put it in there to keep it from running everywhere, because that CA glue just runs and it can just destroy everything. If you're not familiar with using CA glue on an instrument, I always recommend using something like a toothpick to put it on with. You'll thank me, you'll bless me if you've ever done it the other way. It can really be a mess. I've told that story before where that boy saw me doing stuff with CA glue, and he tried it on his instrument. He had to bring it here, and I had to refinish it. It was bad, man. He messed it up big time. So yeah, it can get out of hand in a hurry. Let's see here. I think I'm on to the next one here. Francis McGinnis. Jerry, what is the thickness on the outside of your mandolin where you put the binding on? It looks to be 1/4 inch on the camera, or 3/16. It's approximately like that. My edge is it comes out. Now keep in mind there's a sweet spot just inside there that's very thin, but when it comes up to the outer edge there, it is approximately 1/4 inch. Yeah. So it's not quite 1/4 inch. I would say it's less than that. Probably more like 200 thousandths or something. Okay, I think we may be out of questions. Well, here's one that has question marks at the end. Brody Joe, can you do a whole live stream on this topic? I love Native American tools, maybe even a live dig. Well, I don't know, Brody. It's a possibility down the road. I won't commit to that, but I won't rule it out either, because I do like it. I think it's very interesting. And by the way, again, that location, I think, is the most significant thing about that location, is that it's a kind of a raised, flat area, which they may have had something to do with that, by the way. I haven't confirm one way or the other whether I think they actually flattened that area off or not, because what it is it's a point of a hill coming down to the main creek, but as that point comes down, well, all of a sudden it flattens out and gets real level there. And I think they might have leveled it out, honestly. I think that's a possibility. And anyway, we have evidence that they lived there for thousands of years. Well, again, as I told you, there's that hill behind them, and then there's a hill on each side of them, and then there's creeks coming down these valleys on both sides, and then there's the main creek coming down the valley. So there's 3 creeks. They're right in the middle of 3 creeks, and yet not a chance that it would flood. I mean, because they're up high enough that it's not a chance it could flood. So it's so cool that the area that they picked, if you think about it, it's a place I'd pick, I mean, if I didn't have any other shelter. And you got to remember, these people were pre-Walmart. They had nothing. I mean, you and I, we think we have a bad day. We go to the ice box and there's no ice cubes. We think that's a bad day. These folks had nothing. I mean, if they didn't make it, they didn't have it. That's pretty much the bottom line truth of it. That includes clothes or anything, food, everything, and it's just a different lifestyle. And yet they were smart enough to live and exist for thousands of years. So they were no dummies at all. And then, by the way, that cave that I found is really close to there. I have not been able to tie the cave to them yet, but I suspect they knew about it back then. But the cave entrance had been sealed off shut for at least hundreds of years, because it had the boulder that fell in front of the cave had sealed it off, and it had silted full. So I don't know if it was open back when they were around or not, but I haven't been able to dig all that silt out. It's just terrible. It's just way too sticky. Okay, Rob Walker. Jerry watched rat lift mandolins on YouTube, and the guy made a mandolin with a bolt-on neck. What's your view on that method? Well, Rob, I'm not against bolt-on necks. I guess I'm just old school and like the tradition. I mean, I just like that. So I guess my preference is just to do it the traditional way. Could you build a bolt-on neck that would sound great and look great and be great? Yeah, I don't think that'd be a problem. So I don't have a problem with it, but it's just not the way I would do it. It's just not my preference. Not a strong feeling one way or the other. It's just not my preference. That's about all I can tell you on that. Gotta Flylee. that name, Gottafflylee. Gotta Flylee. Okay, I'm not sure if there's a meaning there that I'm missing, because I'm pretty slow on the reading thing. What is the size of your bridge removal tool? Talking about the aluminum part of the tool. Thanks, Jerry. I have learned so much from you. Thanks for your time. You're welcome. Gottafflylee. I didn't make it any particular size. I just made it where it would fit on the top of a bridge, and that's the truth. So I don't know the size of it. Let me just get it real quick, and I'll tell you. Okay, well, here it is. It's not real big. It's 3 1/4 inches long. It's 1 1/4 inches that way and 1 1/4 inches that way. So 3 1/4 by 1 1/4 by 1 1/4. Now, could you make it a different size? Sure you could. It just has to be big enough, basically, to get this heater in here. This heater is just a long core heater is what they call it. I bought it from McMaster Car, and just drill a hole the size that you can kind of force the heater in. Not like with a lot of force, but you want it to go in snug. And so I was able to machine that, and get it tight tight enough. And then this one here is an actual threaded hole where the thermocoupler goes in. And the thermocoupler is the thing that tells you what the temperature is. So in other words, this is what calls for the heat or tells it to stop heating, one of the two. So you got to have that temperature sensor, a thermocoupler in there too. And so you have to have two holes, one for the heater and one for the thermocoupler. By the way, on this, you definitely want the shielded cable. If you don't have that, it will break off right here. Ask me how I know. Because, yeah, my first one, it broke. It worked for a while, and I was very careful with it. But you know, I was trying to go cheap, and so I bought the one without the covering, and sure enough, I ended up doing it twice. So don't do that. Buy the one with the shielding on it to keep the cable from breaking. And even then, be careful because it will break. Those wires are brittle for some reason. I guess it's because they get so hot. Okay, moving on. Let's see here. I'm not sure I know. Okay, I'm trying to find where I'm at here. Peter Bryan, Cody Scott, are you talking? Oh, I guess he's talking to someone else there. So Cody Scott must have asked some sort of question, and I guess I missed it. I'm sorry. Oh, I see it up above. It says, "Hello, Jerry. What height do you set your strings at when doing a setup?" Well, yeah, that's kind of a half-hour discussion, but you know, at the first fret, I just roughly use a 16 thousandths inch thick pick. And you know, and I just have a feel for it. And like on the bass side, it's basically just slide it in there where it doesn't move the string. And progressively, as I get towards the treble side, it starts to lift the string. So it's just getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So by the time I get to the other side, it's not 16 thousandths anymore. It's probably more like 12 or so thousandths. And I pretty much do the same thing on a guitar or a mandolin. It really doesn't matter too much. I mean, I make it a little bit tighter on a mandolin, you know, and it's just a feel thing for me. And if you think 16 thousandths, that's crazy high. Get a 16 thousandths inch thick pick, look at the edge of it, and tell me that's crazy high. Yeah, just tell me that. It's not high. So at the first fret, that's what I use. And then, like I said, depending on how I'm going across there, I make it tighter and tighter and tighter progressively. And so it's nowhere near 16 thousandths time I get to the small e. I would say it's in the neighborhood of 12 thousandths, something like that. But at the, you know, if you're talking about it on a guitar at the 12th fret, then I'm usually in the neighborhood of 85-ish thousandths, pretty much all the way across. I mean, you know, maybe 80 thousandths on the bass, and maybe 60 would be about as low as I would go on the treble. 70 would probably be about right. 75, somewhere in there. So, you know, and then you think, well, that's a lot of difference. It's not. 5 thousandths of an inch is like almost nothing. When you get down and look at it, it's like almost nothing. It's really tiny. So, you know, you got some play there, but you don't want to go crazy different than that. 20 thousandths is significant. 10 thousandths is fairly significant. So, you know, you can play there about 10 thousandths, you know, with 5 above or 5 below on those numbers, and you're probably fine. But, you know, like if I said 60 thousandths is about as low as you should go, I definitely wouldn't go 50. You might get by with 55, but boy, that's going to be cutting it close. And even 60 is cutting it real close for most instruments on a guitar. You hardly find any of them that'll play perfectly clean at 60. I have found a few, but it's hard to find them like that. So I don't recommend going quite that low. I'd stay in the 80 range, and you're really good at that range, and it's still going to play just like butter. The mandolin, I don't even measure the mandolins. I just do it with a pick. I just take my my pick, which is, I think, I used to know, I think it's 46 thousandths. I'm not really sure. Let's see here. 44 thousandths. So I take this pick and I slide that in at about, it needs to hold it for sure at the 7th fret. I prefer to have it hold it at least at the 9th. And there has been a few mandolins where I can get it to hold it at the 12th. And it'll hold the pick. Now that's not very tall, you know. You may think that, you know, it's a thick pick. But when you think your strings are only that high, and if you ever hit a string and you watch how much it vibrates, that's not very tall. So, you know, when you can get them that low, I would say your average on your mandolin, this ought to be, you know, like a 46 thousandths or whatever at about the 7th fret is not bad. 9th fret is just about perfect. 12th fret might be too low for depending on how you play. Though I think you can get them to play fairly cleanly, but if you hit them very hard, they're going to buzz. Let's see. That's about it on that, I think, that I can tell you. Going back here, let's see. Questions. Okay, I've covered Cody's information. Frazzle guitars. Here's a question. What are your thoughts on JBL Bridge Doctor? Had a customer that wanted one installed. What are your thoughts? Well, I'll tell you what. I really hate to comment too much on this because I know it bursts some people's bubble, but I don't like them. That's just the truth. I don't like them really at all. And some of the brand new guitars come out with them, and I forget which one it is now. It's Breedlove or somebody. I shouldn't even say the name, but some company kind of like that, a good quality, well thought of instrument comes out with those as a standard piece of equipment. Whew, man, I think that's a bad decision all the way around. I really do. It does what it says it's going to do. You know, in terms of pulling the bulge out, yeah, it's perfect. You can't, I'm not knocking the product for doing what it says it does. It does what it says it does. That part I completely 100% think it's perfect. But what it does to the sound is something I don't like to hear. It mutes the sound. It just doesn't ring open like it does without that. It does not sound the same to me. And that company, whichever company that is, and I don't want to name names, but whatever company it is, they did not like me for saying that. They really just pretty much thought I was a hack, a total hack because of saying that. But, I'm sorry, the truth hurts. And I have no reason to speak pro or con against anything like that. I'm just telling you what I think and what I hear. And what I think and what I hear, it ain't good on those. So sorry. That's the truth. But if you had a cheap instrument and you just wanted to fix it, yeah, go for it. It's going to fix it. It'll fix it. It does what it says it's going to do. So that part of it, I don't have any problem with. It's just what it does to the sounds, what I have a problem with. And Andreas, we're about out of time here, but I'm going to try to answer two or three more here. Andreas Valker, I'm making a mandolin-sized guitar shape CGDAE tuned instrument. What should I call it? I don't know. There's a movie named Valkyrie, isn't there? So maybe that's your last name, or I'm probably mispronouncing your name very much. Valkyr is probably closer. I would name it something after you. You've got a unique name, so you might as well use it. Sorry, I don't have a good opinion on that. Maybe somebody else can be more creative. JJ asks, I watched the video on the Gibson mandolin discussion you attended. That was awesome. Oh yeah, that was a neat discussion. Yeah, a neat performance. It was worth my 2-hour drive down there. I'm gonna take one or two more questions here, and then we're gonna call it off here. Dennis Cleveland, wouldn't that be awesome if the natives hid all of their treasured items in that cave and sealed it themselves? Yeah, Dennis. Honestly, Dennis, had I found that cave, uh, you know, 20 years ago, when I was in my, well, actually, I did find it about 20 years ago now that I think about it. And that's about the time the arthritis started on me, on my back and spine and everything. So I was in my late 40s when that started really hurting me. So at that point, as a matter of fact, Ron and I both got in there and tried to dig it out. And we dug out quite a bit of the entrance. But if I had found that when I was in my 30s, I guarantee you that thing would be dug down to the floor and it would be all the way back. I guarantee you. Yeah, but I just can't do it now. And the other negative of that is that the silt that's in there is the stickiest, siltiest stuff you ever saw in your life. It actually reminds me exactly like silicone caulk. You get, like, can you imagine smearing your shovel full of silicone caulk and trying to get it off? That's almost exactly what that silt is like. You can't scrape it off. It just smears. It's the weirdest stuff I've ever seen. So when you know, it would be not only that arthritis is part of it, but then it has to be the worst kind of dirt to dig in your whole life. I've never seen dirt more sticky than that stuff. Okay, Neil Workman, could these knives you use to remove things be made by altering putty knives? Yes, Neil, and I've showed that a couple times. As a matter of fact, several of my knives were putty knives. And now what a lot of people don't realize, though, is putty knives come in a lot of different thicknesses and stiffnesses, and you want one that's relatively stiff, but as thin as you can get it. You don't want one that's fairly flexible. The flexible thing will just fold on you. Ask me how I know. I mean, you need to be able to apply some pressure. I mean, again, I just say it as blunt as I can say it. There's no zipper. When you're taking these things apart, you're breaking them. And so a stiffer blade will help you break it better than a one that's really flexible, because that flexible one's going to dive down, or it's going to do all kinds of things that you're not expecting. Plus, it'll fold on you, and then you'll damage something. So yeah, you want a fairly stiff blade, but as thin as you can get, and you want that edge just razor sharp. Well, yeah, there's good and bad to the razor sharp, because you can also dig down and go through your top because it's so sharp. So you got to be careful with it, but you do want it pretty sharp. Let's see. Yeah, Fallen Leaf says, don't forget to like the video. Well, thank you. Listen, I'm going to have to cut it off there. I think we've gone our full route here. I'm going to look for one more good question. I'm sorry I'm going to overlook other people's questions, but I'm going to try to find one more, and then we'll call it good. Oh, well, Steve asked about my morale report, and unfortunately, I have not found one yet. I went looking yesterday, so I haven't had any good luck on that yet. Okay, I'm going to let this be the last question. Mark B says, what are my thoughts on using walnut as back and side wood on acoustic guitars? Have you ever used it? No, I haven't actually built one that way, although I think I've patched one that was pretty big. Walnut bends easy, so it's good for that. Like if you were building your first guitar and you wanted something that would bend fairly easy, walnut would not be a bad choice. Sycamore is another good choice. It seems to be almost a little too flat in terms of sound. It doesn't have quite the punch and the ring that I think some of the other woods have. That's just my opinion. I am sure there's always exceptions too. That's the other thing. Like if you get a piece of really burled walnut, well, that's going to be harder, versus the plain sawn type walnut. But if you happen to get something that was really burled and had a lot of maybe like bird's eye type walnut, that type of thing, where it had a lot of figure in it, that would be a little harder. And so that might even make it sound a little better. But there's theories on everything, and everybody has opinions. Those are just mine. It doesn't make it black and white 100%. So just be sure you understand that. I think it would be a decent choice, though, if it's your first instrument and you're trying to bend the wood and all that, because bending some of those other woods is really hard to do. And that would bend fairly easy. All right, I'm going to let that be my last thought today. It looks like we have 208 viewers right now, so at least we didn't lose a lot of people by me talking about the artifacts. But thank you so much for being so kind to me. I appreciate it. State of this world right now, we all need to be kind to each other.